your ovulation is on a particular date, the best time to start having sex is 5 days prior, and then continue having sex 2 to 3 days after ovulation. That would be your ovulation window. And the reason why you begin having sex 5 days prior is because sperm can live in the vagina for up to 5 days, if I remember. Hey everybody, it's Busy Mark, and I am back with another video. But before we begin, I am pleased to announce that The Modest Fitting has officially launched, a women's clothing boutique offering skirts and dresses that embody modesty, femininity, and beauty. To learn more about dresses like this one and others available for purchase, head over to themodestfitting.com. But without further ado, let's begin. I am back, and today I am going to be talking about some basic steps that you can take to prepare your body for pregnancy. Having had 2 children myself, while I don't know everything, I do know a thing or two, and much of what I do know, I actually give credit to my doctors. I've had amazing doctors who have been willing to be very frank and upfront with me about what I need to know. Things that are myths, things that are objectively true, and that will help me conceive and then also have healthy pregnancies. And so I'd like to relay some of that information to you. As I was planning this video, I thought it was funny that Habits of a Homemaker announced that she and her husband and her family are expecting baby number 5. So if you have not already gone over to her channel and watched her latest update video, please do so. Tell her hello and tell her that Bendy Mark sent you. All right, so the first thing that I'm going to talk about is tip number 1 is to achieve a healthy weight and body composition. If you've watched some of my other videos in the past, you know that I tend to have a history of doctors that speak pretty bluntly and frankly with me about my weight and helping and really partnering with me to manage myself in an appropriate and healthy manner. And one of the things that the doctors told me that I was like, this is really invaluable information that really did help me throughout my pregnancy and post-pregnancy as well. I had gone in for just routine checkup, and she said, I noticed that you're married. Are you and your husband looking to have a baby anytime soon? At the time, we weren't planning on it, but she said, well, in the event that you do, I'm going to give you this advice. I want you to, she said, think about what kind of shape you want to be in after you have the baby and get into that shape now. She said, in a healthy pregnancy, you can expect to gain anywhere between 25 and 35 pounds. Anything less than that is probably not sufficient to support a healthy pregnancy. Anything more than that is just that, too much, and will likely put you at risk for unwanted development of disease throughout the pregnancy. And it will also just contribute to a lot of weight gain that you will have to lose afterwards. And so anyway, back to what she said, in between 25 and 35 pounds, she said you can expect to lose all but 10 of those pounds the day of delivery. That includes the baby, the weight of the fluid, the weight of the placenta, which you also will birth. That'll leave about 10 pounds of extra weight. And she said, don't worry about that 10 pounds because your body is going to use that to make really good, high quality, rich breast milk to support the baby. And exactly what she said is what happened to me. She worked with me really closely to make sure that I was not gaining too much weight, that I wasn't gaining too little weight. And just like she said, like clockwork, I delivered. I had about 10 pounds left. I gained about 35 pounds. I had 10 pounds left the day of delivery, and in the next 3 to 6 months following the delivery, that 10 pounds was gone, burned up with production of breast milk. And so I wanted to pass that along because that was really helpful information to me. My second doctor for my second pregnancy repeated the same exact thing, but she added, you will oftentimes hear people say that when they are pregnant, they are eating for 2. She said that is misinformation. When you are pregnant, you are not eating for 2. You are eating for 1 plus an extra yogurt, or you're eating for 1 plus an extra handful of nuts that you normally would not eat. If you actually eat for 2, you're going to gain substantial amounts of weight, far more than is necessary for a healthy baby and healthy mama, and you're going to put yourself in a rough position after you give birth. So just be mindful of that. And something that I would add that my doctors didn't add is I would tell you to get strong. Being pregnant puts strain on the body in different ways. Something that I really struggled with, especially in my second pregnancy, was lower back pain. I carried my babies super low in my belly, and so what that did is it put a lot of strain on my lower back, and I had a lot of lower back pain, so much so that even after I delivered, I had to get like physical therapy to help massage out some of the just chronic pain in my lower back. Eventually, as my strength returned, the pain went away. Something that I learned after the fact is that had I been doing a little bit more concentrated strength training for my lower back and also worn some supportive bands to help lift my belly as I was pregnant, I probably could have sidestepped that pain. So what I would say is get strong, because the pregnancy is going to strain your bodies in ways that you may not be prepared for, and in ways that you have not ever felt before because you've never been pregnant. And so get strong, build strength in your body, make sure that you're not doing any lopsided workouts where it's like you're concentrating on lower body but you have no upper body strength, and definitely not vice versa. You don't want a ton of upper body strength and no lower body. Full body, even workouts to give your body as much strength as possible to carry the pregnancy well. Another thing I wanted to add about managing proper weight is that it's important to be at an appropriate weight, because you being at the appropriate weight will reduce the risk, not eliminate, but reduce the risk for developing stretch marks. Stretch marks, I know that there's a lot on the internet about like all of these potions and lotions that will magically make your stretch marks go away or prevent you from getting them. Science doesn't corroborate any of those claims. Stretch marks is largely a determination of how big the baby is, and then two, how much elasticity you have in your skin, which are two things that you don't have control over. But what I can say is if you are already pretty overweight, and so you already kind of have a big belly, and then you put a baby inside of that, and then the baby expands it even more, you will increase your risk of developing stretch marks. And so just another reason to kind of manage your weight before conceiving. Tip number 2 is to start tracking your menstruation and ovulation. This is something that I started doing as soon as I began menstruating, not necessarily for the ovulation, but for menstruation. But I've come to understand that not everybody was taught to track their menstruation. Your periods should never be a surprise to you. You should know exactly when they're coming, and you can track your periods either in just a pencil and paper on a paper calendar, but nowadays there are tons of apps that are available for you to track your ovulation. I still use one now. I would recommend that you do that. And while you're trying to conceive, you would not just be trying to track your menstruation, you would also be tracking your ovulation window. This is really important information for you to know, because it's going to determine when it will be most optimal for you and your husband to come together for the purposes of conceiving. I would encourage you to research and make sure that the information I'm about to share is still up to date. But when I was still in the process of actively trying to conceive, it was understood that if your ovulation is on a particular day, the best time to start having sex is 5 days prior, and then continue having sex 2 to 3 days after ovulation. That would be your ovulation window. And the reason why you begin having sex 5 days prior is because sperm can live in the vagina for up to 5 days. If I remember, I know for a fact it's several days, but if I'm remembering, it's about 5 days. So that's why you don't just have sex on the day of ovulation, but throughout the window. Another thing that I would recommend that you do, something that I have heard, is that when couples are really trying hard to conceive, sometimes what can happen is they get so tunnel focused, so like tunnel vision, that they forget that sex is still something that they come together with for the purposes of loving each other and enjoying one another. And so while I would say you are being strategic and intentional about when you are having sex, make sure that sex doesn't become something that feels like pressure to perform, and certainly don't do anything to strip away the romance from the interaction, because it's just going to make you stressed out, it's going to make him stressed out, and it's not the way that you would want to go about it. Just be relaxed about it, and in time, it will happen when it is supposed to happen. The other thing that I would recommend is that you either begin or evaluate the multivitamins that you're taking. You should be taking high quality multivitamins, or even potentially high quality prenatal vitamins. Whichever one you choose, they must include folic acid. Folic acid, probably you will hear your doctor talk to you about that. Folic acid is very important for a healthy development of babies in the womb. And so you don't want to miss out on any of that while you're taking your vitamins, for sure. Everyone's budget is different, but I remember at the time I was pregnant with my second, I had a hard time keeping vitamins down, and I was having some like nutrition deficiencies, and so I actually got a prescription multivitamin that was full of all the things I needed, including the folic acid. So talk with your doctor, but for most people, over-the-counter vitamins with folic acid will do the trick. DHA and folic acid. The next thing that I would recommend that you do is that you get familiar with your family and your husband's family's medical history. The reason why this is important is because when you have a baby, the baby is not going to vouch for him or herself. Whenever you go to appointments, the doctor is going to ask you, what's the family's medical history? What's on the mother's side? What's on the father's side? And so it's good to be equipped with that information. You and your husband should sit down and talk about any chronic diseases or just illnesses that have popped up on either side of the family, and have a list if necessary, maybe even in your phone, about what illnesses tend to pop up in the family, so that you can be on guard about that and be armed with that information for when you have doctor's appointments. The other reason that you want to know your medical history and your husband's medical history, specifically your husband's, is because when you come together, and this is even outside of children, but when you get married, your family's cuisine needs to take into account the illnesses on both sides of the family. So if diabetes is on one side of the family, you may want to avoid dishes and meals that are very high in sugar. If high cholesterol and hypertension is on another side of the family, you may want to tailor your cuisine for that purpose. And so nutrition and health really falls into the hands of the wife and the woman in the picture, because for the most part, most of us are the ones who do the cooking and the meal preparation, and that only amplifies as you start adding children, because now you're forming and shaping the health of their bodies as well. That segues nicely into my next point, which is to learn about nutrition. I realize that nutrition is not something that I think that we as Americans tend to focus on too much. And really, I think in an ideal situation, health and nutrition is a skill set and a base of knowledge that would be passed down from generation to generation. I know for most of us, what ends up happening is we have family favorites. We have like recipes that are beloved by all of the family, and that gets passed down. But not as often do we have legacies of nutritional information being passed down. This is a bit embarrassing to admit, but I didn't fully understand nutrition until I was in my early 20s. And interestingly, it's because I had a internship where I had to travel outside of the United States into Asia, and I stayed there for a semester. And being in Asia taught me so much about health and nutrition that I came home and learned, because I realized that I had serious information gaps about, I didn't understand the nutritional value of foods. I realized after the fact that I didn't really know how to balance a plate, like how to eat balanced meals. I didn't understand much about cruciferous vegetables. I didn't understand the purpose and the value of dark green leafy greens, which fruits actually cause intense spikes in blood sugar and which ones don't. I had a very shallow understanding of nutritional information and nutritional education. That's something that you want to get a tight grip on, especially if you are trying to conceive, because your baby is going to rely on you fully for its nutritional needs, and whatever is lacking in your diet will also be lacking in the baby's diet. So we are in a day and age where information is not restricted from us. It's not held behind a barrier that we can't reach. If you know that you don't really understand how to balance fruits, vegetables, whole grains, lean meats, if you don't know how to cook those things and balance those kinds of meals together, now is the time to head over to Amazon or whatever retailer and get 2 or 3 books on nutrition. Learn about how to prepare meals that are balanced, healthy, full of high quality foods, because you will need it during your pregnancy, and you will need it as you are responsible for preparing meals for your family. Try to stay away from processed foods as much as you possibly can. Try to stay away from added sugars as much as you can. These are things that you will see reiterated in the books that you will likely read, but go out and get the information. educate yourself. It's okay if the people in your family that came before you did not give you this legacy of information, because where we are in the world today, where we are in time, you can find whatever information you need. If you know that you don't know how to eat properly, go out and buy a book and educate yourself on it. You will be happier that you did it. The other thing, this kind of goes without saying, but I did want to include it, is it's time to come off your birth control if you are taking it, and come off properly. Usually, if you are on any sort of birth control system, what's recommended is that you complete the full cycle of the birth control and then come off of it. There are, I don't want to say risks, but just like unintended consequences from stopping something in the middle of a prescription, which is what I did. I think I had tried some sort of birth control and I didn't like the effects that it was having, and so instead of finishing it, I just stopped it in the middle of the cycle. And at the time we were not trying to conceive, and by the end of the month I was pregnant because my hormones were all over the place, and the count, like, I wasn't able to track because my hormones were making my ovulation happen at different periods of time. All that to say, come off of your birth control properly so that your menstruation and ovulation cycles can be as undisturbed as possible. And the last thing that I wanted to add, last but certainly not least, is to begin researching first of all, the topic is budget for baby. Begin researching some of the costs associated with taking care of a baby. And that's largely going to depend on how you approach it. For us, we did not do, I forget exactly, cloth diapering. We did not do cloth diapering. We did disposable diapers. So, like, let's just say, I'm throwing out some examples. Understand the cost of disposable diapers. Understand the cost of wipes. Understand the cost of what it may take to furnish a baby's room. Is the baby going to sleep in your room? In what contraption? Will you have some sort of bedside bassinet? Like, come up with a spreadsheet of all of the expenses that you anticipate incurring, and sit down with your husband and look at how this is going to affect the budget. The other thing that I think gets mentioned less commonly but needs to be discussed is it is a good time to start reaching out to your insurance company and learning what they will and will not cover as it relates to the day of delivery. Most of your prenatal appointments and visits will likely be covered. There may be some expense associated with each visit. Reach out to your insurance company to figure out what that expense will be, budget it, but certainly on the day of delivery, different policies cover different things. There are different costs associated with a vaginal birth. For some policies, there's a different cost associated with a cesarean birth. And so things like that need to be taken into consideration and planned for ahead of time, because what you don't want is to be recovering from a pregnancy, sleep deprived because you're taking care of a baby, incurring new expenses, and then be surprised by an insurance bill that you weren't expecting. But if you have had a baby and you have some tips to add to this list of how to prepare your body and your family, for that matter, for pregnancy, please include those tips below. Let me know, are you and your husband planning on making a new addition to the family? How are you guys preparing for a new baby? But as always, thank you for tuning in, and I will see you next time.